Now I will request Partha Ghosh to reflect on this program and the talks given by our distinguished speakers. Partha Ghosh.
Thank you, Puran. Thanks to all my friends, Sam Petroda, Suresh Prabhuji, Gopal, Larry Kaufman, Devender, Shantanu Raj, and all the other faces I see, Sam Ligero, Anil Kakotkar, Abbott Voice, and many others who have joined this session. And I personally feel very touched, at the same time very humbled, at the same time feel very challenged. Indeed, the world is in the middle of the word re. Now, as Gopal said, there are hundreds and thousands of books which begin with re. The first book on re was written about 40 years ago, which was re-engineering. And one man became very famous who started talking about re-engineering of US business models, particularly as Japan and German companies started becoming very, very visible in the United States. So that's what the birth of the term re. And since then, we have reimagined, we have re-engineered, we have rescoped, revalued, re-innovated, and now we are talking about reset. But there's one common message, though, that for the last 40 years, there has been a degree of discomfort around the world. When I talk to my Japanese friend, there's a discomfort. When I go to China, in spite of tremendous success, there's a degree of discomfort. When I go to Europe, I feel the same discomfort as we feel in India as well as the United States. So there's one common denominator that we have to rethink about the future with a new sense of purpose. Now, I ask myself, why? So what did go wrong? Now, when I think through as a problem solver, putting on my management consulting hat, and then as an engineer, I look at how the economic progress has happened. And then as an economist, when I look at the economic theories, there's a one fundamental cancer which has been overlooked, which is that everything since the Industrial Revolution has been a thinking based on physics. And by definition, physics means that if you do A, you get B. So, and that thinking overflowed or spilled over in economics. So there's a feeling that if you incentivize, if you penalize, you can change behaviors. So it has always been a kind of what I call the Cartesian model. And it worked in some societies, but most societies it did not work. Largely because how people behave is very cultural, and most of the economic thinking basically developed in Europe, if not in England, and then it moved to the United States, where the economic progress became more and more evident. But much of the world has a very different culture. And first thing I noticed when I went to Japan, that many of the Japanese development programs in the 50s, in the 60s, and the 70s was not based on Western economic model. It was very much based on how Japanese thought about their day-to-day life. And that's where I saw practice of Vedikism. So when Gopal was talking about packaging the Vedic philosophy, the Vedanta, which all of you touched on, and the book that has been published also touches on, and these are, by the way, series of lectures which I kind of had the opportunity to deliver in India, in Bangladesh, in Europe, in America, which brought together, basically talks about that we have to understand the human, the culture at the base of the pyramid. And the base of the pyramid in Japan is different from the base of the pyramid in India, and the base of the pyramid in Assam is very different from the base of the pyramid in Gujarat. So the need to connect with the local environment, which Gandhiji talked in terms of Sarvodaya, by the way. When the Gandhiji used to talk about Sarvodaya, it was making the local environment, the local village, the center of economic activity. And I feel it is important for all over the world. We see that in the United States, the way someone in the Middle East connects with the American system versus someone in Boston connects with the American system is very different. A typical Bostonian or someone in New York understands Wall Street, but someone in the deep interiors of Pennsylvania or Ohio connects with the America differently. And that's why you see a tremendous divide, which is brewing in this country, as Sam was talking about in the context of India as well. So this divide is becoming visible for me wherever I go. And that's why the term "re," because the world became extremely transactional. And I think we have to bring back the spiritual, the humane, and as well, I would say, the relational part of living. That's what I think Suresh Prabhu was talking about when we talked about if your neighbor is hungry, there's no reason for you to feel happy. If your neighbor is well fed, then you feel good. And unfortunately, we do not feel that way. And that's where I feel the human conscience have become significantly more, I would say, paralyzed. And we have to unlock that human conscience. So that's why I came to the word "re." And I think Sam talked about it is reset of the mind, it is reset of the human conscience. And then the question becomes how? Because, yeah, people have been talking about it, but it has not happened. And the problems have only multiplied, as Gopal was talking about. If you look at India's GDP per capita compared to other Asian countries, there's nothing to celebrate. It has, in fact, become worse because it was in the top 3 in the 1950s. Now it is not in the top 10 in year 2020. So obviously, whether we talk about hardware or software, we did not perform. And unfortunately, in the United States, I see a similar kind of decadence at a higher level, but $60,000 per capita versus $2,000 per capita. And that's where I feel India has an opportunity, because the world is looking for reset. India needs to reset. India has not performed. It has to perform with a new kind of wisdom, and which wisdom is resident in our ancient philosophy, fortunately. Now, the point I fully agree with Gopal, that how do we package that ancient philosophy to create the new India become significantly more vibrant? And that perhaps is definitely the need of the hour. And I boil it down to one word. I think we have to think of new kind of nutrition. Because when I think of India's nutrition level, whether we talk about general physical nutrition, I was shocked to learn that 9 out of 100 babies in India within the age of 0 to 24 months get the right level of nutrition. 9 out of 100. That's I would call the physical nutrition. Second is the spiritual nutrition. That how do we cultivate in every human mind around the world? And by the way, the nutrition problem is a problem all over the world. In America, you see it in terms of obesity. In other countries, you see it in terms of different kinds of diseases. So nutrition is connection with nature, how we improve that connection with nature. The second nutrition I would call is the intellectual nutrition. Intellectual nutrition to me is how do we help to celebrate Sarvodaya? Because Sarvodaya you can only celebrate when at the village level, at the smallest level of economic activity level, people feel empowered. And they can only empowered when you have the intellectual nutrition. And the third nutrition is the spiritual nutrition. Now, what is interesting to me when I look at the history of universities, beginning from Taxila, then to Nalanda, then to Oxford, then to Cambridge, then to Harvard University, there's one common denominator. As you all know, Harvard started with the Harvard Divinity School. Oxford and Cambridge started with a focus on theology. Nalanda and Taxila in India, both the universities, for the people who are not from India, you should know, Taxila was established in 500 BC. What was the focus? To understand the human mind, the human spirit. and the universe. A lot of work was done in astronomy and mathematics, as was Nalanda. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about, and I'm involved with the universities, what do we talk about? What should we teach so that the person can become an entrepreneur or can find a good job? So it has become very transactional in nature, as opposed to saying at the center, we have to have the third where, which I will call the human where or human engineering. So Gopal did rightly say we focused too much on hardware, it did not work. And he suggested software. I will go a step deeper. We have to focus on the human where. And actually, we need a harmony of the three wares, the hardware, the software, and the human ware. So I think that is what's the challenge, and I think we have to work on it. I hope the IIT Academy of Leadership would be able to begin this transformational process. It's much needed, but not for the nation, because we are living in a borderless world anyway. It is for the humanity. And that's, again, is the fundamental message we can take from the Vedic philosophy. And particularly if those who are not so much familiar with Vedic philosophy, there are three simple messages. And why can't we orient our education system, our economic system, our, I would say, healthcare system, the education system around those three philosophies? One, harmony with nature, that become more nature-oriented so that we could literally seek the nutrition that nature offers. And that would need some work. The second, that treating everyone in a fashion that there is God resident in every individual, that becomes significantly more respectful towards each other, between nations, between communities, and between individuals, which is not happening, as you could see what is going on in Europe. And economically, Europe has always been more advanced than the rest of the world. But the First World War happened in Europe, the Second World War happened in Europe, and now perhaps, I hope it doesn't happen, but the crisis is serious. We will see what happens tomorrow when Putin celebrates the Victory Day. So that brings to a very fundamental point, that the world is, and that's why I agree with Sam's book on redesign of the globe, the world needs a new way of engagement. And what we have done over the last 500 years, we have just moved on the same linear fashion. And we have not been able to solve the problem. The League of Nations was formed so the wars would not happen. That was after the World War I, but World War II happened. The United Nations was formed, but wars have continued to happen, and United Nations have proven useful. But a lot of resources are spent. The United Nations budget is huge. The European Union budget, the Brussels headquarters, NATO headquarters, the budgets are huge. So obviously, we have to use our resources with a new purpose. And that's where my fundamental point would be, that's what we talked about, cellularism, that it is not capitalism, it is not socialism. It closes to Mahatma Gandhi's Sarvodaya, but what it says that let's use the power of the technology at the cell level. And cell to me is the smallest economic unit, where we could train people, develop people in the local environment so that we could connect with nature better. So I am indeed humbled with all the wisdom shared by all the stars that, Puran, you have been able to bring together. And of course, your opening thoughts were absolutely touching. I was speechless because I did not prepare anything. It came from the bottom of my heart. But as Sam has noticed, I met Sam in 1985, 86. So we are literally celebrating almost 40 years of our friendship. And we have tried. But I do believe, as Gopal was saying, we have to be hopeful. Because, I read a book which I want to end with that book, Renaissance before Renaissance. People give a lot of credit to Europe's rise because of the Renaissance, which began in Sam's country, in Florence, Italy. Sam Leggero, I meant. Which began in 1210. But there's a book there was a 500 years of discussion that Europe needs to wake up from the dark age. So I don't think we should feel impatient. India as a subcontinent has to wake up. And we have to keep working on it, as Sam has done, as Gopal has done, as Suresh has been doing, Puranji, you have done it, and many others who are in the forum today. So I think we have to keep trying, we have to stay positive, but we have to not extend the past into the future. We have to draw a new S curve. So with that, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.